so that's, I don't know, I just thought of that the other day when I was, early morning when I was waking up thinking, that's why quilting is so neat. Because it's an heirloom and it never wears out if you take good care of it.
That's right. Well, some of these questions, they're just real basic, but they're things that maybe your kids and grandkids might want.
Sure.
What is your full name, including any nicknames that you might have been given as a child?
Or even as a grandmother?
Or as a grandma.
Okay. My full name is Sandra Louise Ringsby Young, and Louise comes from, my father's name was Louis, and he wanted a boy really bad, so he called me Louise, getting that close. As a grandmother, I am known as Grandy, which stands for Grandma in Sandy, and also Mima, and also Grandma.
How sweet. So Louise comes after, did you say your grandma?
My father.
Your father.
My
'cause
father
he
was Louis.
Okay. So was Sandy after somebody? Were you named after somebody?
I should have said too, yes. That's the name. I didn't like to be called Sandra because whenever my mother was not happy with me as a child, she would call me Sandra.
Yeah.
You know? And so when I got old enough, I dropped it to Sandy. And I thought that was much softer and gentler.
Right, right. What is your birth date?
My birthday is February 8th, 1941. And I almost had my second son on my birthday. His birthday is February 9th, 1969.
And where were you born in Texas?
No, I was born in Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
Okay. And when were you married?
I was married on June 23rd, 1962.
Just had your anniversary.
Just about.
Oh, just about next week.
June
'cause that's
23rd.
my mom's birthday is June 23rd.
And the reason we chose that date is because my father, Louis Ringsby, his birthday was on June 22nd, and I just wanted to get married on my dad's birthday.
Nice.
So
And
that year his birthday was on Thursday, and so we had our rehearsal dinner on Friday, and we got married on Saturday.
And where were you married?
We were married in Bakersfield, California.
It's close to where I was. That's okay.
Didn't know anyone in Bakersfield, California.
Most people don't even know where it's
It
at.
was at a Baptist church, but Paul's father was a minister, and he married us in this church. And that's when Paul and I had met at Biola College down in La Mirada, California. And so my parents lived in Bakersfield, and they wanted, us to get married at their church.
Wow.
So everyone had to travel to my wedding, including the bride and groom.
And how did you and your husband meet?
Paul and I met at Biola College. It stands for Bible Institute of Los Angeles, California, and we were the first class out on the new campus in La Mirada, California, and Paul was vice president of the freshman class, and I was treasurer of the class. And how we started dating was he needed a date to go to the LA County Fair with his older brother and wife that just had been married, I think, maybe 2 weeks. So he flipped a dime between me and another girl, Susie, can you believe?
Flipped a dime.
And as I say, I've been flipping ever since.
That's great. And where'd y'all go on your honeymoon?
For a minute.
Okay.
Paul and I were married at a very young age. He was 20 and I was 21, and his father had to give him permission to get married. And we were married up at we went on our honeymoon up at Hume Lake, way up in the mountains just outside of Fresno, California.
That's great.
I guess you edit this, huh?
What was it like growing up when you were young?
When I grew up at 1425 P Street, stood for Pennsylvania Street in Gearing, Nebraska. It was a little tiny town of about 3,000 people. You could walk from one side of the town to the other. And everyone seemed to know everyone. I grew up in a very small home, maybe 900 square feet. It had a basement, but I remember for years all three of us girls slept in one bedroom. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. My sister and I slept in bunk beds. My baby sister slept in a baby bed. And for excitement, I would jump off the top of the bunk bed into her bed. We had one bathroom, and my father hardly ever got into the bathroom because he had 3 daughters and a wife. And I just remember growing up in Gary, Nebraska, as we played kick the can, we threw a ball over the house, I forget what you call that. But we had and we always liked to play circus out on my mother's clothesline, and so therefore her clothesline wires were always sagging because we had all the blankets and the sheets stretching out our clothesline. Another thing I remember about growing up in Gary, Nebraska is during the winter it snowed a lot, and my dad would make us these ice forts out of snow. We would roll the snow like to make a snowman, and then we would put the snowballs on top of each other, and then Daddy would spray them down, and during the night it would freeze and we'd have igloo. And so that was really neat. And then I remember as a child I had a horse named Babe. I thought she was the most wonderful horse. She was very sway back, and Dad told me later she was almost ready for the glue factory. But I could ride on her, standing up on her rear, holding the reins, and she was galloping as fast. To me, it seemed like it was, just really fast. And I was pretending I was a circus rider.
Wow.
I was in the circus. So, can't say anymore.
That's okay.
That's cute.
Did you have to do a lot of chores when you were growing up? And what was your favorite and what was your worst?
Okay, when I was growing up, I just loved animals, and this little boy, Marvin, gave me 2 little rabbits. And my father told me that they were male and female, and that's when I learned about the birds and the bees. But my dad was very good because he built me these wonderful rabbit hutches, and before I knew it, I had about 30 rabbits. And so I had to take care of them. I had to help my father butcher these down in the basement, and I literally sold them to Safeway stores. And that's how I made my spending money. We didn't get spending money just handed out to us. We had to work hard for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I raised rabbits. And then also my grandparents, my mother's parents, Walter Hiram and Vesta Alta Perkins, Vesta Calesta Perkins, that's my other one. They homesteaded a farm out in Mitchell, Nebraska, and they came out in covered wagons. And so we spent every weekend out on the farm, jumping on my grandfather's haystack and knocking all the leaves off the hay. And one of the chores I loved to do out there was go with Grandma and help her gather the eggs under the chickens, which would peck us. But Grandma just had a way of getting those eggs out without being pecked to death. And, I had dogs, I had cats, I would catch mice out in the fields, and they were my pet mice. Finally, I had to move to the basement because I had such a menagerie. And one chore that I had to do at home was my dad also hunted for raccoons and bobcat, and we had this huge, kind of like a dog kennel out in the backyard, and I always had to clean the kennel. But I really didn't mind it because I got to go hunting with my father.
Well, you had an exciting life.
I really did have a
You
neat,
did.
I mean, children today, who needs this walking stuff? And, they just don't know how to have fun anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that leads up to the next question, which would be, what is one of the most amazing inventions that has come about since you were born that you can think of?
Well, my grandmother, who lived to be 102, Vesta Perkins, she saw every invention there was, from electricity to the bathrooms to the airplane. But probably for me specifically would be the invention of the computer, and just the way you can get all kinds of information. When I came down with breast cancer as well as this ovarian cancer, my husband Paul would spend hours on the computer researching all about these cancers, and that's how we would try to make our decisions as to what kind of treatment I should have.
Yeah. Did you have favorite kinds of books that you liked to read growing up?
Well, I have to admit, I was very much a tomboy growing up. It was very hard for me to sit still. I have a granddaughter that's the very same way I am. And I was just an animal lover, and I would rather be outside playing with the animals. I would ride the cows on the farm, you know, chase the mice in the granary. I just loved animals, so I really didn't take much time to read, although I was a very good student in school.
Right. Did you have a favorite toy that you would play with, or did you just like to be with the animals?
Well, one thing that I really remember, we didn't have toys back so much because I grew up in a very poor family pretty much, although I didn't think it was poor. But out on the farm, we would get under the lilac trees, and my grandparents always had a wonderful garden, and we would pick corn when it was still baby corn, and those were our dolls, because they'd have hair, you know.
Wow.
And then we would pretend, we would dig roads in the dirt, and we would build little mud houses and stuff. And that was our village and our town, and, you know, and so we did a lot of pretending with sticks and baby corn and things. We didn't have toys. Well, I shouldn't say we didn't have toys, because at Christmas time I loved big baby dolls. And I also had paper dolls that had open and shut eyes. And all these years I've looked in antique stores trying to find a set of paper dolls like that. But I can't find them. But my mother said, yes, I had paper dolls like that.
Wow.
So, but back then we just didn't have toys like they do today.
And what was the school system like, and how did you get there growing up?
The school system that I was involved in was very strict. If you did something wrong, sometimes you got your hands slapped with the ruler. I remember some boys in my first grade class, in Mrs. Dutton's class, came to school with their little trucks, so they had to go up and run them up and down the blackboard until their arms were just about to break off. And you just didn't sash your teacher's back. You didn't. You dressed. I always had a dress on. I was just noticing in photographs that I always had a dress on. There was hardly anything as shorts. We could wear jeans, but the girls dressed very modestly back when I was in school. In junior high and high school, I loved to run track. I played girls basketball. I was very athletic. So. And I always got along with my teachers. I love school.
Yeah. How did you get to school? Did you take the bus?
Well, you know the old thing, I walked 600 miles.
In the snow.
In the snow. But actually, yes, I walked at least a mile to a mile and a half in the snow. I was never taken to school. I don't remember ever being pampered that way at all. We had to walk to school and we had to walk back. And I lived in western Nebraska until I was 14, and it was really cold there in the winter time. So, but we just, and my father, we only had one car, and he rode a bicycle to his job.
Wow.
So.
Did you and your friends have a special hangout or place that you'd go for ice cream sodas or anything like that growing up?
No, nothing like that, because growing up we had one drugstore that had a soda fountain. But I remember we used to just hang out in the backyard playing circus or house or whatever under the blankets on the clothesline. We played out there a lot. That was really my dad had made us a wonderful teeter-totter, which I'm not sure my grandchildren even know what that is today. But we just pretty much hung out in my backyard.
That's okay.
Yeah.
How many years of education have you completed?
I have completed, I went through sophomore in college, and then Paul, Grandpa, we all got married, and I never finished education. I never finished school. I went to college to find a Christian husband. I just felt that was extremely important to find a Christian husband. And first I was going to go to Multnomah School of the Bible, then we moved to Bakersfield, California. So I went to Biola. And at that time, when I was growing up, it's like if you didn't get married by the time you were 20, you were an old maid. And getting married and having a family was very important.
Do you remember your first kiss from your husband?
Well, one thing I remember about Paul Joseph Young was that I really respected him because he was a boy that really respected girls. And we dated for about 6 months, and I was wanting him to give me a kiss so bad, and one night we were on a date, and we always had this favorite place in Los Angeles that we would like to look at the lights and stuff, and he asked me if he could give me a kiss. And I was so profoundly impacted by that he was so polite to ask me that, that I said, yes, you can give me a kiss.
I've been waiting 6 months.
But back then, you know, as teenagers, especially Christian teenagers, we really tried to respect each other.
What wise advice would you give to your grandchildren on their wedding day?
Could I give them wise advice before their wedding day?
Yes.
I am making time capsules for all my grandchildren, which the Lord has blessed me with 11 of them. And the only piece of wisdom that I'm giving to them is make sure that the decisions you make when you are young are godly decisions, something that you can live with all your life. And because I feel that once you're married, that is a holy sacrament, and that you should never get a divorce.
That's good.
And that's like a piece of wisdom I'm going to be putting on.
How many children did you have?
I have 3 sons. Should I name them? David Paul Young. He's now 6'4". Stephen Mark Young. He's 6 foot. David, I should say, is a very accomplished computer person starting his home business. Steve, our middle son, is an architect, and he just always loved to look at houses, and now he has an architectural building firm up in Indiana. They're building 110 houses a year now, and he has about over 100 employees. So, and then Timothy James Young, and by the way, we named all of our children biblical names. That was really important to us. And Tim is a high school teacher, and I'm very proud of my sons, not only for their accomplishments for their work and their lives, but the thing that I'm the most thankful for and proud of them for is that they're all walking with the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And He is central in their lives.
Do you have a special memory of each one of them when they were born?
Well, I just remember growing up in a family of girls, I really wanted a son. So when David was born, Paul and I were really excited about that. David was always sort of my protector growing up as a little boy. Stephen, he just had a love for animals like I did. We've always sort of had this kindred spirit for animals. And Tim is, when he was born, he was just the cutest little thing. And he just, he is very knowledgeable in theology. But I just remember when they were all 3 were little, we had so much fun down in Clearwater, Florida, where we lived. And every morning I would take them to the beach with a neighbor and her children, and then we would come home and the kids would take naps after that. But we had so much fun just playing in the ocean water down there. But as far as the specific thing when they were born, I was just extremely thankful that they were healthy babies, that I made it through delivery, and I was just very, very thankful that God had given me 3 healthy babies.
What was the most rewarding thing about raising your boys? I know you said that they're all serving the Lord now, and that's, I know, very rewarding. But can you think of anything else that?
Well, I think it's very rewarding when you are a family unit, and my boys were typical boys, but on the other hand, they were good, obedient boys. And we had a lot of fun. They loved to laugh. We would role play out Bible stories using the cushions off of the couch and stuff. I especially remember Jericho, the Battle of Jericho, and shouting and everything, and we had pans and spatulas. And it was just, I can't tell you one rewarding thing, but there was just so many rewarding things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's neat. So when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? Can you think?
Well, I guess when I was a child, what I wanted to be more than anything was just a mother and a homemaker.
Mhm.
And God has really given me the desires of my heart.
Uh-huh. And do you remember what your first job was?
Yes, my first job was probably when I was a junior in high school. My first real paying job, and I think I got 25 cents an hour back then, and that was in 1957. I was a clerk in a dime store. And one day I made a mistake on the cash register, the old-fashioned cash registers, and I had to pay back every bit of that money out of my 25 cents an hour.
Wow.
But I think that was probably my first job. Oh, and before that too, I babysat a lot.
Mhm.
When I started, around 12, I started babysitting a lot.
Who was the person that had the most positive influence on your life?
Undoubtedly, the person that had the most positive influence on my life was my grandmother Perkins, my mother's mother. She just, I'm not sure why. Well, I was the oldest of 12 grandchildren that she had. She loved to sit me on the counter and wrap my hair in rags and make long curls. But then she just, I don't know, every Friday night, Grandma and Pappy would come to town from the farm, and they would pick me up in their red and gray Dodge, I remember, and we would be starting up the hill back to the farm, and Grandma and I had this thing, well, what shall we have for dinner tonight? And we both knew that we would have hard-boiled eggs and gravy on toast.
Uh-huh.
But we just went through that little thing. But
Wow.
so,
what are your religious beliefs?
well, when I was 12 years old, I grew up in pretty much of a non-Christian family home. When I was 12 years old, a girl by the name of Marcia Weber in Gary, Nebraska, asked me to go to the circus with her. And for some reason, I had the idea that Christians didn't have any fun. But she took us to the circus, and I thought, wow, that family, those Christians might have some fun. So then she asked me if I would like to go to church with her, and I said yes. And I came to know the Lord. One Sunday morning, I was under such terrible conviction about my sins because, see, I used to run away when my mother wanted to spank me with a wooden spoon. And so I went running out the door of this church, sitting on the church steps, and that's where I invited Jesus Christ into my life. And I just feel the most important thing you can do is to invite Jesus Christ into your life and let Him be the Lord and Savior of your life forever.
Now, this will probably include your mission field, but what activities have you especially enjoyed as an adult? I know you do a lot of quilting.
Well, one activity I really enjoyed as an adult before the quilting was I used to raise Shetland sheepdogs. And at one time I had 22 Shetland sheepdogs. And I showed my Shetland sheepdogs in shows. We did dog obedience. All three of my sons were trophy winners and ribbon winners in dog obedience. And many of the women in the church would bring their daughters over to our house when we were having puppies so that they could teach them about sex, the birds and the bees.
Uh-huh.
And my kids knew all about breeding shelters. They knew all about the dogs having the puppies. They would catch them in their hands. They knew how to take the membrane off. They knew how to help the puppy start breathing. And so it was a very earthly thing, I guess you would say, but
Natural.
yeah, very natural to life. And so my kids never had to, they just knew about sex and what was right and wrong from the time they were quite small because of raising dogs.
Mm-hmm. When did you and your husband go on your first mission trip?
Our first mission trip was in 1990. My husband was pastoring a church, Vineyard Christian Fellowship here in Fort Worth, Texas. And one day we received a call, could you please go on this mission trip with us from some people with Campus Crusade for Christ who were going to Bulgaria, Romania, and Yugoslavia to show the Jesus film, the premiere showing of the Jesus film. And they wanted a pastor and their wife to go along because they were taking a group of about 20 people. And I said, you know, we would love to do that, but we don't have, I think it was like $10,000 to go or something. And so we sent out some letters, and within 2 weeks, we had all of the money to go on the mission trip. And when we were in Bulgaria, one night, both of us woke up in the middle of the night crying. Our hearts were so burdened for the people of Bulgaria. Because when we got there, we saw 6 women fighting over one tiny little bar. So it was right after the Iron Curtain had come down, and we just had a real burden. And so we came home, found another pastor to take over our church, and within 3 months we were back in Bulgaria. And we were there for 3 months at a time, and we were in charge of training 18 Bulgarian Jesus film teams, going out into villages that had no churches, hadn't even heard of God or Christ because of communism, and we were very privileged to have started 92 Bulgarian churches in Bulgaria.
Wow.
That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because, you know, when the Iron Curtain came down, everyone was naive. They were very delicate of spirit, and we had a large crusade in Sofia, Bulgaria, with Luis Palau as the speaker, and I think there were about 40,000 people there, and they all just jumped over the rail fence to come and accept Jesus. It was the most exciting thing.
Wow.
And we saw children that were crippled literally healed, instantly healed,
Wow.
and it was just like living the book of Acts all over again.
So God still heals today.
Yes. But
Yes,
so far he hasn't chosen to heal me yet, but he will in heaven for sure.
that's for sure.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult thing about being on the mission field?
Probably the most difficult thing about being on the mission field was there were no washing machines, no dryers. And after about 6 weeks being in Bulgaria, we decided that we should wash our sheets. Well, the sheets were very heavy cotton fabric, and we were trying to wash them in this little tiny sink, and we couldn't hardly wring them out. So after that, we just went for 3 months at a time, just like the Bulgarians. We never worried about washing anything because it was just too hard, you know. There were no clotheslines or anything either.
Wow. And what was the most rewarding?
The most rewarding thing, I think, was starting those 90 Bulgarian churches, speaking in Bulgarian churches. Dober Dan, that's good morning, how are you? And one of the things the Lord showed me in a dream one night was that I would be hugging women, because when communism went out, a lot of women that were getting widow pensions with the communist government no longer got any money. And I had more women in my arms crying, and I didn't know why. But the Lord just showed me to hug these women and show them love. And it was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It really was.
Is there anything that you've always wanted to do but haven't been able to?
There's only one thing I haven't been able to do. I've always wanted to live on a horse ranch. So what I'm asking the Lord, if he'll let me ride in his army on a white stallion.
That's great.
And do you think he has just men, or do you think women can do it too?
If you were to have to live your life all over again, would you do anything differently?
Absolutely not. I think I have been the most blessed female in the world. I have a good husband that's always loved me. We've been married 43 years now, June 23rd, 2005. Being married to Paul, we have seen churches grow from 200 to over 2,000 in 8 years. We've seen many, many, many people come to Christ. No, I wouldn't change my life in any way.
Do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to pass on?
Well, I sort of did that earlier, but the main word of wisdom that I would like to pass on is that the decisions you make when you are a young teenager, and you're going to think you're in love, but it could be lust, but the decisions you make with either a male or a female as your life's partner can either make your life or it can make you extremely miserable. You know?
And do you have, some people do that are Christians, have a life passage of scripture that has meant so much to you? I know there's lots of them.
Well, I like Romans 8:28. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And having cancer right now, I'm getting through all of this by the strength of the Lord. And I think we can do anything because of the strength that Christ gives us in our lives.
So was it made for you, or?
No, this is just a very tiny Hitchcock rocker. And Paul bought this for me when we were in seminary, so I could rock all my babies in this chair. And even in the back of the chair here, you can't see it too well, but there's the word boo in it that our oldest son carved in it when he was little.
Very cute.
And these are, when all my sons grew up, I wanted to make quilts, and so these are some of the quilts. This is one of my applique quilts. And I won first place at a quilt show with this one. This quilt, this quilt was a $5 a month block, and so I ended up making a quilt out of that one.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of my first quilts that I made. It's called the Amish Magnolia Star.
Beautiful.
And then, if you want to come in the bedroom, I've got a whole bunch.
Okay.
It's called the Hanover Tulip quilt, and I love the 1930s, the old-fashioned fabrics, so I made that quilt. This one I made with little snowmen in it.
Cute.
And then I cross-stitched all of those cross-stitches, and so I decided to make them into a quilt, into a wall hanging.
Wow.
So
You just put them all together?
Yes, those cross stitches were all done as I was traveling back and forth to Eastern Europe and into Europe, Russia, China, Peru, South America. And this is where a lot of creativity takes place with the sewing machine.
That is beautiful. Aren't those cute, those little chicks down the bottom? Good.
I had hand-stitched every one of these little squares and half circles. And so I had it machine quilted, and I hope she sees it from heaven. And this is my last quilt that I just finished making. This is called a Pinwheel Quilt, and I just finished making this one. It's king size, and Steve and Christy are going to be getting this quilt.
Beautiful.
Many hours. It took me 5 years to gather all the fabric for this quilt. And there's antique chicken feed fat material in here too. That's great. This is our family. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
This is our family. There's Paul and I have started something. We have 17 in our family. And this past February of 2005, our two oldest sons took all of us to Cancun for a family vacation. And it was such a blessing, and not one single child got sick, hurt, except Gregory lost his kitty in Cancun.
Mm-hmm.
His little stuffed kitty. But we found him another one. And this whole picture is full of Christians. This was a scratch picture that my youngest son, Timothy James Young, painted. He just painted it very quickly. It was just to get an idea, and you should see the original painting. It's just absolutely beautiful. And then he painted this one also. This is of men during the Depression. This is men during the Depression. They're talking over the despair in their lives. One man is waxing quite elegant, and the rest of them are looking very bored. But,
Wow. And he did that one as well?
yes, and he painted the Madonna and Child up there.
Wow.
Oh, and I should say, this will be in the Bible. I don't know if that'll be too glary or not. But that's him, and also that picture there.
So this is your husband?
Mm-hmm. My husband, Paul Joseph Young.
Wow.
And I tell you, when he would do that, the church was so full when he didn't have room to sit. This was with Community Bible Studies International. Our director in Italy said, "Would you like to have an audience with the Pope?" And I thought the audience with the Pope was Paul and I having lunch with the Pope. Little did I know about the Pope and his life. And anyway, we barely got into the church. There were so many people there, and all of a sudden, here came the Pope, and these people from St. Louis that I was talking to said, "You just have to shake hands with the Pope," and they just pulled me down. This is Paul way back here, and I didn't realize that was going to be such a famous picture.
Wow. That,
There were 5 brothers and 3 girls. I'm sorry, 5 brothers and 2 girls. This was Paul's mom and dad, Woody and Evelyn Young. And then this is Paul's family growing up, and this is Paul right here. And this is Paul as a baby, and this is what I fell in love with.
What a looker, huh?
Is that glamorous enough? And I found that cutout of love up there one time when we were up in Michigan camping. I didn't ever mention Paul and I love to camp. There's so many more things I could have said. So, and I made this when the boys were very young, because it says, "Please be patient, God isn't finished with me yet." And I needed a constant reminder, having 3 sons, that God wasn't finished with them yet.
That's neat.
And then one day I had lots and lots of frames of pictures, so I started cutting all the pictures up, and I decided to make a collage that we could all enjoy. So the grandchildren love to look for themselves in this picture. Now I have another granddaughter that isn't in that picture, and I need to start another one. This is, it's dark over here. This is me when I was a baby, and this was me when I graduated from high school.
wow.
And this is a picture of my family growing up, and if you notice, both mothers have those arrows on their dresses, so that must have been a big fashionable thing back then. This was my grandmother's family way back in the early 1900s. And see this, oh, I'm gonna touch it. This is me and my 3 sisters, and I was dressed up in my cowboy outfit there to. My mother didn't think I would ever be a girl. She was really worried about that.
Those are great pictures.
Yeah. Sandy Young with our 3 sons. This is David, the oldest, then Stephen, and then Timothy. And that picture was taken Thanksgiving of 2004. And so while we were at it, we had a picture taken of all of our grandchildren. And we're expecting a 7th granddaughter this August, and she is going to have my middle name, which I feel very honored about. I'm asking the Lord that I can live until the end of September so I can see her. My youngest son, Tim, has become quite an artist. This is one of his artworks. This is called The Bath. It's what do you want to call it? What do we call them, Paul? Not an original, but a classic. No, not classic. What do you call this?
Done by one of the masters?
Yeah, masters. Yeah, that's a masters. He's copied one of the masters.
Hmm.
In college, he did. I was just overwhelmed that he did that. He gave that to me for Mother's Day when he was going to University of Texas. And then the stitchery up there I did, the barn I did, but I just like country living, and I like comfortable living.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of interesting up here. See that piece of barbed wire? That's from the Berlin Wall that Tim brought home one time. He loved to go on missionary trips too. And this is a piece of Dutch work that he painted on boards.
Wow.
And these hearts, I was in 2 quilting groups up in Valparaiso, and when I left, the women gave me these hearts. And another gal from that group died of cancer also. So that's probably kind of it. Painted that picture, and people always asked me if that was me, and I said, oh, absolutely. It's just I have a picture of my grandfather out on the farm feeding chickens like that, so I always loved that painting.
Rebecca, how many?
Well, Sandy is the love of my life. We met on 7th and Holt Streets, and we're going to be married 43 years next week, and that adds up to 7. And so, and I was 19. You were
Grown up 20.
no, I guess I was 18. You were 19 at the time, and we fell in love, and we haven't stopped. We have not had. Oh, we've had 1 or 2 hours, maybe a day, where we've had difficulties. But we've had an awesome life together. She has been a partner with me, and I with her, in terms of seeing God do so much. The thing that attracted me to Sandy was the vibrancy that shines from her face, kind of an effulgence, a light that goes through her eyes that just, I don't know, it does something to my inner core. And she hasn't stopped, even with cancer. and wherever she goes, she helps people to feel at home. When we went to Bulgaria, I don't know if you told this story, she hugged people, and she couldn't speak the language. And she's always done that. I always used to go to the hospital, and I do pretty good with my voice and my words, but she does fantastic with her arms and her smile. And so together we were just a great team. I needed her, and maybe
And
she
I
needed
needed
me.
you too.
And she has been such a tremendous mother. And as guys, sometimes we take things very passively. She has been so active, so passionate in terms of making sure that our guys follow Jesus Christ and every one of the grandkids. And it's incredible, our life together, and the joy that, Sandy, that you have brought to me. I thank God
I
for
love
you.
you very much.